how am I growing today? How am I better today than I was yesterday? This is a lifelong thing, and it's addictive, man. We're either growing or we're dying. We're improving or we're getting worse. And that's something that we need to understand. We are going to grow or we are going to die. So let's embrace the principles that are going to allow us to grow, are going to allow us to be a better product of ourselves. Hopefully we can become the best possible version of ourselves every single day.
Man of Mastery Podcast, episode 20 with Nick Hayes. I want to welcome everybody back this week. This podcast, if you've been listening for a while, is about seeking out, learning from, and most importantly, applying and acting on lessons of mindset, on routine, on habits that can lead to incredible performance in all areas of your life. And to that end, I can't think of anybody better aligned to speak to that than today's guest, Nick Hayes, who I interviewed today about his book, Elite, which is about high performance lessons and habits. So before my summary of key takeaways from the interview and before we jump into it with Nick, just two quick things. One, routine. As you may have heard or read, I've really been working lately at my morning and evening routines, including some time daily for gratitude. So let's do a little right here, right now. As I've said before, and I can't say it enough, thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your time to listen, and your support. I truly value it, and I will continue to do my best to live up to it with this show's guests and content. And also, by way of thanks, I want to read out a listener review on Apple. I super appreciate any of the feedback that you guys have there, and of course, all the ratings and reviews and subscriptions there help. From Trevor on Fire, it says, "On the right path. Michael and his guests are on the path. So many nuggets of inspiration and motivation. Let's do this." Trevor, I know you're out there getting after it, so thanks for the feedback and thanks for writing that, buddy. Okay, second thing, Facebook, Instagram, this crazy world of social media is always on the move, and it's a really noisy space. One of the really important things you could do to help is go to my Instagram post for this podcast episode and share it. What that means is you get the little heart for the like, you get the comment, and then the third one looks like an arrowhead. Hit that, and you can share the post promoting this episode with a friend or friends in your list there on Instagram. So that not only helps me, but it helps our podcast and it helps our guest as well. So thanks in advance for that. Today's guest, Nick Hayes, knows about performance at the highest level and joins us to talk about how that looks to him as a father and as a professional. My three key areas of action I took away from this one were, one, Nick talks about having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And after hearing his description and that distinction, you'll have something, I think, to use as a sounding board or a test for yourself when you think about your mindset. Second, another indicator he shares that we can use is that things that intimidate you are probably worth doing. So listen to that one and carry that one around and have a look at whether you're staying at home in your comfort zone or pushing to grow beyond it. And the third one, Nick shares an incredible example of leadership he experienced in his Navy days from the man who won his respect and became his mentor. It's a really good one to check in on accountability and authenticity in leadership and whether we're getting and giving what we should in mentorship. Okay, with that, let's get into it with Nick Hayes. Today I have Nick Hayes, who is an author, speaker, comedian, and apparently rollerblade enthusiast. I'm reading from his Instagram profile. Man of many trades. Nick, welcome. Appreciate you making time.
Michael, thanks for having me, man. This is awesome.
Awesome for me, and I do appreciate it. Rollerblade or roller derby, or what's going on? Is that real, or is that part of your comedy?
You know, what's awesome is that it is real. When I was growing up, I started skateboarding, and then I made the move to rollerblades. This is like early 90s, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch times, And so we had a little quarter pipe, turned into a half pipe, and that's how I would get to school, all that. So, and that was back in the day. They were like skating rinks, So on Friday night, you could go to a skating rink, and it was awkward, like a junior high dance, trying to find a girl to meet. So that was cool. And then it happens. I obviously didn't rollerblade through my time, like in the SEAL teams. And then after I got injured and was trying to recover from that, my wife got the idea to run a half marathon, and I wanted to support her as much as I possibly could. So we had 2 kids at the time, little kids. So what I did was I kind of developed a little pit crew idea to where I could take our double bob stroller, both kids, I only had 2 at the time, both kids in the stroller, and then, a radio playing music, have all of her goo gels, some water. And the only way I could really keep up with that payload, especially since I was kind of out of shape from the surgery and stuff, was to find some rollerblades. So I went and bought some rollerblades, threw them on. Man, it came back like riding a bike. And I was supporting her on all of her long runs and everything else. So the day of the race came up, and my plan was to support her again. You train how you fight. And this is the way that she's been, preparing to run. I was like, you know what? I'm going to support her in this marathon up in Montana. So that morning I dropped her off. I had a cigar and like a Frappuccino that morning, expecting to be coasting on rollerblades. And long story short, the gun goes off. We all start running. It was so packed, I couldn't get the rollerblades on. And so about 2 miles into this thing, I realized that it was going to stay really packed, and I was in too deep. So she took off ahead of me. I'm pushing 2 kids now with a full payload, rollerblades and everything else. And I'm still waiting to strap on these rollerblades. Ended up getting sick to my stomach. It was just brutal. I was probably 5 miles into this thing before I realized that I was going to have to run a half marathon, completely untrained. So I ended up seeing it through and completing that race. And that was kind of the first step towards getting back on track. I don't know if you've ever been through a major surgery, but it'll change your life. And that showed me that, I still had what it took, and I was going to be able to rebuild.
Nice. That makes perfect sense. It speaks to, I think, the determination and intensity which you've approached apparently a lot of the phases of your life. Yeah, unfortunately, you and I share in that somewhat. So I blew out L4, L5, and L5, S1 all at the same time, and I didn't have fusion surgery, but I was living a very low quality of life and pain and all that, as you probably unfortunately well know, for several months before I went in for surgery. And anything back related is a long road back. So I feel for you. I got a lot of respect for, and certainly understand the what that takes to recover from. Burpees is one thing that I absolutely despise, and yet I am convinced through experience that movement is really healthy, not only for keeping core strength and back strength going, but something about it just ultimately helps me. So as much as I don't like those things, in fact, I'm part of a little group that was given a challenge this month of 300 burpees for time. So when you and I hang up today, I'm taking my son to soccer, and while he practices, I'm going to knock out another 300 burpees and see how that goes.
Nice, good for you, man. That's one of those things. There's still things that I'm apprehensive to do as a result of that surgery and just having been through it. And burpees is one of those things that I've kind of avoided. I've avoided jiu-jitsu too. And I think it's time. I think it's time to start trusting my body and some of those more dynamic movements. So that's good hearing. Maybe I'll join you on the burpee challenge today and see how it goes.
Nice.
Well, I came up wrestling, and it's something that I really enjoy, and you're working every muscle in the body. The sportsmanship is phenomenal. I love boxing. I love striking, but it's just not the same. There's more longevity in the sport. But I actually hurt my back rolling. That's how it happened. Even though I was, deployed at the time, like we were doing 2-minute rounds and we were working takedown, and I shot in double leg. My hips weren't in tight enough, and a bigger dude probably shouldn't have been working takedown with him, but great sprawl. He sprawled out, man, and that's what did it. All the fluid in my disc actually drained out. It took like 3 people to help carry me back to my room. It was so embarrassing.
Oh my gosh.
So in the back of my mind, there's this thing that I'm a little bit apprehensive, but the quality of the people that you're rolling with really matters. So I think as long as everyone is top notch, I should be able to avoid injury. There's kind of a void in my life right now because of it,
I could see that. I'm in physical pain just listening to you describe that. It's giving me chills. But that's let's talk a little bit more about that as we get into the book, because I know you've got, I think, 3 kids now, and as we go through some of these habits and principles you've laid out, I know I do want to talk a bit about fatherhood. And there's a theme that I keep coming back to, that there's something about combatives and that type of sport for kids, whether it's wrestling, whether it's jujitsu, whether it's craft, something along those lines, that other martial arts possibly, that seem to teach a style of discipline and resilience and grit and open doors way beyond the sport. Some things taught explicitly, and I think some things maybe by osmosis or however it happens. There's a magic to those that you just don't really find with most coaches or experiences with other team or individual sports.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and as a father, I'm thinking about, what do I want to expose my kids to? How do I want to do this? What works for me? What are some things that I would change? And it's really interesting. I had the benefit of individual sports and team sports growing up, and I think that's something that is really important. Like, you learn a lot of lessons, say, from like playing football. I played football, and you learn that, hey, I have to do my job so that my teammate can do their job. We all have to be operating at a very high level for this to work, and there's a lot of power in that. But to contrast that with wrestling, where you put your foot on the line, your opponent puts the foot on the line, and the whistle blows, there's no teammates coming to help you. It's a team sport, overall score, but it's not. It's you and the other person, and you're going to pay the man if you didn't prepare. And I'm so glad that I had that experience as a young man, both experiences equally. So I want to make sure, in whatever form, my kids, I'm going to let them follow their own passions, right? I'm not going to be like, hey, this is what I did, this is what you're going to do. But I think as a construct, that construct is important. And I want to make sure that they're introduced to both of those as well as an instrument. And I say that it's all conceptual right now because I know a lot about raising up to an 8-year-old, but 9, I know nothing, So they're still young and I'm learning as I'm going, but that's something that I'm probably going to commit to and make sure. And if I can get involved in coaching as well, I'll stay as involved in their sports as makes sense, but there's going to be certain times where I'm going to step out and let that coach do their job. I can still remember multiple coach names from when I was growing up and what they meant to me, and specific things they said that really helped me out. I think that non-parental coach is a really valuable position in a growing person's life. They get away with a little bit more. It's kind of like that dynamic of, mom is always talking to them, so sometimes it drones out a little bit. Dad comes home, they're listening. They fall in line a little bit differently. And I know this is an assumption and probably just a ratio, but that's certainly what I've experienced. And then you have this other dynamic from the uncle who can come in, or the coach, or someone that's a one-off, and say, hey, no, I know exactly. I did that same thing when I was young. I completely understand. But man, here's what happened. It didn't work out. And, they approach it from a different angle that I think opens up the mind. And then they can push a little bit harder without bringing up, past or creating baggage and stuff. So I want to make sure that they have that coach in their life as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I definitely agree with sort of the different relationship or the impartiality. And I mean, we all experience as parents that sometimes kids will listen to almost a complete stranger more than they'll listen to mom or dad sometimes. But
yeah,
in your saying that, I was thinking, I mean, I think there are lessons you can get from really any sort of sport, not just some of the combatives or types of sports I mentioned where you're literally going to get knocked down and have to get back up. And maybe it just comes down to that coach and somebody explicitly wanting to embed the lessons. What I was thinking of when you mentioned that, and you mentioned Spartan racing, which is something my son and I have been doing pretty heavily the last few years. One of the things that's really cool about it is it's a trail run and it's broken up by obstacles. So for me, who runs a lot but doesn't like to run, it makes running a little more interesting. But those obstacles in these races, they are physical obstacles, but it's the mentality and the mindset that go along with the sport is one of those things being a metaphor for life. And so I've got an 11-year-old. I'll give you maybe at least what I know from raising up to an 11-year-old. And we were just in Hawaii for a series of races. I ran 3, my son ran 2. So he ran on Saturday and he ran on Sunday. And he's been running pretty competitively for his age group. Hawaii was an epic venue. And he got so excited when we saw the venue, including the podium. They had it all decked out Hawaiian style. And he's like, I can't wait to be on the podium Saturday. Well, he went out Saturday, blazed out of the starting gate, kind of literally elbowed a kid out around the first turn, just sprinting in the lead. And he took off into the woods, and my wife was up there chasing him and taking videos and pictures. And apparently he failed, I don't know if it was the first or second obstacle, which was a vertical rope climb, which he has dialed in. I mean, we've got a rope hanging in our backyard that he practices on all the time. It's not a problem, and he couldn't make it up. In fact, he got almost all the way up and couldn't get that last pull and make the bell. He slid down, had to make his burpee penalty, and that was it. He gave up. He defeated himself and didn't run the rest of the race, literally and figuratively. Walked a bunch of it, and his time was, I don't remember. I'll say like an hour. Well, he came out of it feeling sorry for himself and teary-eyed, and I was out doing a 7.5-hour stint myself, so my wife got a chance to talk to him before I did, and she gave him a good talking to and said, what happened there? You beat yourself, and let's look at it and what happened, and what do you want to do about it? You want to walk away feeling sorry for yourself? Do you want to walk away feeling defeated, or do you want to figure out what you're going to do tomorrow when you race Sunday? And sure enough, he came back there Sunday pumped up, knowing that Saturday was valuable as a lesson. And he paced his run, he knocked down the obstacles, and he did something like 38 minutes on Sunday, which would have beat Saturday's winner by 4 or 5 minutes. So I think with anything, you can find those little teachable moments along life's journey, sports or otherwise.
I'm so glad that he had that opportunity, because that's why we train, right? Those are the mistakes that you want to make in a low risk environment. And the fact that he was able to experience what that felt like and then go back to the drawing board and ultimately be successful, that's incredible, man. He'll remember that for the rest of his life. But that's how life goes, right? Like, we have these benchmarks as we're growing and doing. You do something challenging and you're like, well, you know what? I did this other thing, so I think I can do this. And then you challenge yourself even more and you're like, you know what? I did that last one. I think I can do this. And it just grows and it builds. And we kind of build this mental filing cabinet that we can reach to when we're challenged with new things. That's why we train hard. That's why, especially you talk to a lot of SEALs, like people always say stuff like embrace the suck, or, like embrace the challenge, or, there's all these ways of saying it, but it's so true. When you're looking to be uncomfortable, when you become comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's the state that you've created for yourself, it makes it really easy to not make that failure a part of your identity, but rather just a little setback and a learning tool. And now I have more data and I can reassess and I can come back stronger than I was before, because your identity isn't being challenged by this. This is just the way things are. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be setbacks. I've seen it before. I know exactly what to do, and I'm going to move forward and be successful. So the earlier you can get those lessons, the better off you are, because you're just not going to waste as much time. Like, the one thing I can't abide, one thing that I hate within my own life is learning curve cost. It's going to happen. You're always going to have a learning curve cost, but it should be mitigated as best as possible. That's why we train hard, because we want to knock those things out early. And then now we can go out there and be successful. That's why we look for mentors, because if we listen to them and we set our stuff up like them, then we're ultimately going to mitigate that learning curve cost and be successful quicker. And that's something that I wish people of today, especially the young people of today, would grasp, is that, it's kind of like, I say this in the book, but it's kind of like the resume. If you look at somebody's resume, it's going to be amazing. It's going to look great. It's going to be all the highlights. But what the resume doesn't show is a myriad of failures that it took to get from one bullet point to the next. Whatever's in bold. I mean, it just takes so much failure to get from one to the next. But if you let one of those failures stop you in your track, then mentally, experientially for yourself, essentially that failure becomes the bullet point. And that's no good. You can't allow that. That's why you have to get back up. You have to keep pushing. You have to keep driving, because don't let that failure become the bullet point. Let that failure be just one rock on the road to your success, right? To your goal. And that's something that I think has been somewhat lost today.
My opinion, my view, my experience has been that success is observed in today's sort of instant gratification, 24-hour news cycle, social media. Look what I did. Success is observed as a point in time, as an event, whereas the reality is that behind that story, almost every time, if not every single time, it's not an event, it's a journey, it's a process, and often quite a long one, a very jagged one certainly paved by failures, which are good. Get them out of the way as soon as you can. They are learning experiences, and they're stepping stones, not an end state unless you allow them to be. And so let's pivot back to your book, because you mentioned it and we've been talking around it. This is a lot of the stuff that's in there. I think you're somewhat modest in not promoting it more, but so I'll set it up. You've got a book that's come out this year, I think relatively recently. It's called Elite. Subtitle is High Performance Lessons and Habits from a Former Navy SEAL. Here's what I really liked about it, Nick. I just read it recently, and one of the things it's a common maybe topic that's touched on by a number of people, including a number of veterans and in particular Navy SEALs. What I really liked, and I love this stuff. I'm kind of a student of it. I've got a bookshelf full of it. I think one of the things that's incredible about the U.S. military and the U.S. in particular, is that is an organization that has put time and money and investment into figuring out team dynamics and performance and organization and culture, maybe more than anyone else in the world. We can study the maybe the Disneys and the Starbucks of the world, but these guys have put a lot of money and a lot of time into it, which is why I think there's so many incredible lessons to be learned. But one of the things that, for me, reading it, I'll just kind of tell you how it laid out for me. I know you specifically talk about how you wanted the book to be readable and relatable, and it absolutely is. And you talk about having an incredible resume with some pinnacle success milestones that you're very open in the book about being built on failures. I think the coolest thing for me in reading it, and the 13 lessons and habits that you have in there, you subtitled it High Performance Lessons and Habits. To me, these are lessons and habits for a high quality life, a high happiness factor of life. So I saw it as really broadly applicable.
Thanks, man. No, I really appreciate that. And that's what I was going for too. It's like, this isn't how to become a Navy SEAL. It's not. I have a problem with the word success, right? And I can tell by the way you're talking that you do as well. It's just impossible to define. There might be this one goal that we have, but once that goal is met, it's not done. Winning the gold medal, the vast majority of people who have that experience, their first thought is, what's next? Like, I'm on the mountaintop, what's next? I think that's the right mentality. You're never done. It's a lifelong lesson. So the trick is to enjoy the ride, man. To be thankful for the opportunities to fail. It's not just about getting on the team. It's about being the right member for the team. It's about being an asset and not a liability. That doesn't stop once you get access. Now you can get to work, and that's something that I really wanted to resonate with people. There's principles in those books that applies to fatherhood, to parenting. And I really wanted to kind of show people that it's in a world where everybody wants that magic pill, you're hungry, throw something in the microwave. We want immediate satisfaction, get rich quick. Like, our entire society is kind of built around that. And it's a lie. It doesn't happen, and it's not going to make you happy. This is something, you need to put processes in your life, structures in your life that are going to continually yield fruit, that are going to make you better in every area of your life. One principle that I talk in there, kind of some smart words, right? The aggregation of marginal gains. It was developed by a cycling coach in the UK. The book Legacy, James Kerr talks about how a rugby team, the All Blacks, became the winningest team in sports because they took on these principles. And in the SEAL teams, it's become a phrase that we say all the time, not aggregation of marginal gains, but we talk about being 1% better every day. This is something that's very common. You'll hear almost every SEAL public speaker is going to say that, and it's that commitment to improve a little bit every single day, which I think is powerful in and of itself. But what the cycling coach was pushing with this idea is that if you compartmentalize your life into different sectors and then say, I'm committing to improving in every single sector, 1% every single day. This is me as a learner. This is me in my quiet time, in my headspace. This is me as a spouse. This is me as a father. This is me as a professional. This is me as an athlete. You separate that and commit to improve 1% every single day, and you're going to experience exponential growth. And that becomes your identity. How am I growing today? How am I better today than I was yesterday? This is a lifelong thing, and it's addictive, man. As soon as you start seeing things this way, you're going to start looking. There's a great book by, I know, probably should be plugging other books when I'm releasing mine, but I don't care. Great book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol Dweck. She's a psychologist and a professor at Stanford. And she talks about how there's two different mindsets. There's the growth mindset and there's the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is I'm either smart or stupid. It's binary, right? Left or right, this or that. And the growth mindset is entirely different. It's not label driven. It's how do I grow? How do I get better? If this process worked with this easier question, I wonder if it'll work with this harder question. So you start embracing the harder challenges if you embrace that growth mindset, which is what I've been discussing. Whereas if you default to that fixed mindset, you're more inclined to take the easier problems because you are success or you are failure. Your identity is wrapped up in the outcome. That's no good. It keeps people out of the gym because they don't want to look stupid. It keeps people out of school because they don't want to fail. And it's a terrible thing. So that fixed mindset is something that it's garbage. It's a lie. Labels don't exist. Everyone is in a constant state of change. You look outside your window, there's not a single organism out there that is maintaining the status quo, that is staying neutral. Everything that we see on a day-to-day basis is either growing or dying. There is no the same. You, right now, our bodies, we're either growing or we're dying. We're improving or we're getting worse. And that's something that we need to understand. We are going to grow or we are going to die. So let's embrace the principles that are going to allow us to grow, are going to allow us to be a better product of ourselves. Hopefully we can become the best possible version of ourselves every single day. And that's the way you want to live your life, because it's not stagnant. It's exciting, man. You just want to see what you can get into. If something is intimidating you, that's a great indicator that it's probably something you should do. It's intimidating you for a reason. And I'll tell you, this is something that it's like, I put this into practice this year. I actually did a podcast and I said that. And I was like, hey, if something's intimidating you, it's a great indicator that it's something that you should do. I hadn't said it before. It was natural in conversation. And later on that night, I was with a good friend of mine who was there at the recording of the podcast. And he goes, hey man, you've been talking about doing stand-up comedy for a long time. Why aren't you doing it? And I was like, because I'm intimidated by it. You got me. He called me out, man. That's why I love having team guy buddies, So he called me out and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something about that. I reached out to a buddy of mine who's a comic at the Comedy Store in Beverly Hills. And I told him, I was like, hey man, I want to do a set, public speaker, all this stuff, no drama. I just want to get up there and see what I can do. So he reached out to the guy who does the booking. Within 10, 15 minutes of my buddy posing me that question, I was able to get booked at the Comedy Store. It happened so fast. As soon as I got off the phone, I was like scared to death. I'm like, wait, what just happened? I've made a terrible mistake. So I had like a couple weeks to prepare, putting together a little set, and I got up there and knocked it out, and it was fun. Got some good laughs, man, and sure enough, got bit by the bug. I was like, man, I got to do this again. So now I'm just, it's my new thing. It's something that is challenging me. It's an entirely different way to see presentation. Usually I have an hour. Now I have like 5 to 7 minutes. You got to be tight. It's more TED Talk. Every word needs a purpose. So it's stretching me as a speaker. It's making me better as a presenter. And it's also fun. It's kind of it's refueled me in a lot of ways, because I get bored every couple of years. As soon as I'm done learning, you're never done learning, but as soon as I'm in a place of like, I got this, I don't need to prepare as much, this is flow state quickly, I start to get bored. So I like to constantly push into uncharted territory, and this is what that is for me right now. So just know, stand-up comedy is a great example of this. There's Jerry Seinfeld has a joke. He says the number one fear in America is public speaking. Number 2 is death, which means that at any given funeral, the average person would rather be in the casket than performing the eulogy. And it's true. Like it's scary. It's scary, and that's why I needed to do it, because I'm not going to be a hypocrite. If I'm saying something, then believe me, I'm doing my best to live by it, and I stand by it as a process. So that was my chance to, let the rubber meet the road.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is really cool. I didn't know that's how you got into it, but yeah, it's a little bit like the way I got into this podcast. I've been on this journey myself, and this concept of mastery, and which is much like you're saying, life's dynamic, and mastery is not an end state. It's a constant challenge. 2 steps back, 1 step ahead in trying to better yourself in whatever area that might be. And this podcast is something that I challenged myself to do, to push my own boundaries in so many ways. I can't stand listening to my own voice. Getting out there and networking, reaching out to people, which is kind of not my nature. Social media is something that's not my thing. So many aspects of it, including just taking action. And not, you mentioned some of this in your book. I probably have a nature of being a little bit more of a perfectionist, or getting caught in analysis paralysis. And I ended up with this Man of Mastery, sort of super cheesy podcast title, but it was like, let's lay it down and let's move and see what happens. Because, as you said, success, I think it's a loaded word. Much like elite is probably a little bit of a weird one as well. And I like a lot what you said in the book about how, I think the quote was, the margin between elite and the status quo is slim, which is, I think, what you're saying in terms of another one I think I've picked up on from your community is ordinary guys doing extraordinary things. It is that compound interest of little changes, little actions, that 1%, the little improvements that there's no magic pill, but there is, right? In a sense that there are things that are simple to apply and simple to do, but they are difficult in the sense of commitment and consistency. That's what you need for that follow through and that compounding result that gets you the 1% accumulating to that delta between being average and being extraordinary.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's kind of the difference between, you take a Tylenol, your headache goes away, but you take your essential amino acids and vitamins every single day for a duration, your body gets stronger, your mind gets better. It's more of a buy-in. There's longevity there. It takes time, but you get what you pay for. It's one of those things. It's earned, and then once you earn it, like you benefit from the result. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting. Like, it's tough with the English language. If you think about the Greeks had 7 words for love, right? There's a word for the way a father loves a child. There's a word for the way a husband loves a wife. They all mean very different things, but in our language, we pretty much boil it down to one word: love. I could say it and mean one thing, and you hear it and hear an entirely different thing. And success is the same word. It's exactly the same way. Elite is the same word. It means something different to everybody. I think part of the challenge is defining what that means to you, right? It's subjective. It's like, what is my version of success? What is my version of these things? Well, I mean, you can do that with love too, but you have to start with defining, like, how does this fit into my strategy? What am I really trying to accomplish here? And then you have to be mindful of the fact that that goal might be so far away that it seems entirely unattainable from where you're at right now. That might be where you want to get, but you need your map and compass to get there. It can be intimidating up front. That's one thing I learned going through SEAL training, right? Like Hell Week is one of those situations where you're up for 6 days, you're putting on like 200 miles, carrying, boats and logs on your head, and, in the freezing cold water, wondering how you're going to survive at times. It starts on Sunday, ends on Friday. Sunday night, Monday morning, you're thinking, wow, we just got started, man. I feel like I'm about to die. Like, how is this even possible? If you try to get through that week thinking about Friday, you're done. It is not going to work for you. And I always ask people, like, hey, what day do you think gets the most quitters? And people will say, like, Thursday, towards the end. But no, the opposite's true. Monday, man, people drop like flies because they're thinking about Friday, and it's unattainable. It's too far away. Our brains can't comprehend what that looks like. So the trick is, with any of these goals that just seem insurmountable, where you want to be, you're not sure how to get there. Well, you got to take something big and break it down into very small chunks so you can celebrate success along the way. One trick that a lot of guys used in Hell Week, myself included, is to think about getting to the next meal. Like, there's one thing I know about this schedule: they're going to feed us. I know when they're going to feed us. I'm going to be sitting with my buddies. It's going to be a little bit warmer than I am right now, and it's coming. It's coming. Just get to the next meal. And then there's other times where that next meal seems too hard, man. This evolution, this portion of this block of training is just too challenging. I don't know if I can get through it. Well, guess what? Take something that's too big and break it down into something smaller. We're working with the logs, putting the log over our head, stressing out our shoulders. Man, my shoulders can't take any more of this. Instead of going into some self-defeative talk, instead take charge of your mind and say, listen, they can't do this forever. They're going to have to start working legs soon. My legs are fresh. My legs are dynamic. All I have to do is get the legs. Now you're positive. You're thankful. You're ready. You're embracing it. And you're allowing yourself a victory, because the second you get to legs, you're like, check, I made it. So it's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts, only a success by 1,000 small little wins. And if you can set up your road to your goal with a bunch of little attainable wins, oh man, you're just going to enjoy the ride, And that's my version of success. I have one life. I get to enjoy. I get to smell the air. I get to feel the texture of the wood. I get to enjoy this life for a certain amount of time. It is my obligation to enjoy it. My obligation, even when things are tough, especially when things are tough. You talk to any parents whose kids are still in diapers. People tell them, hey, don't blink, man. It goes by too fast. When you're that parent and the kids are in diapers, you're like, promise? Promise? Get me out of this. And then the second they're out of diapers and they start putting together sentences and words, they're like, that's becoming a little person. I miss my baby. Oh my gosh, this is happening so fast. Like, especially when it's challenging, that's when we really need to take stock in what we have. We need to be thankful. You can't be thankful and depressed at the same time. It can't be done. Give yourself some wins. Be thankful for what you have and resonate in that. It's going to change your outlook. You're going to enjoy yourself. You're going to have fun, which is going to increase your performance. And ultimately, you're going to accomplish your goals.
That's one note I made in your book. I flagged that page and wrote down a note for myself that it's impossible to feel gratitude and pity or self-pity at the same time. That's a really good one. I think that might have been in your chapter on sort of guarding your mind and mental toughness. I mean, there's so many great anecdotes in there to illustrate the points. Well, let me ask you this. So, I mean, one of the things about the process that you went through in that career is there's a weeding out process, drastically, huge attrition rate. And you've got a story in the book about how you come in You got self-deprecating humor is one of your assets. Don't know if you use it on stage, but yeah, you talk about being one of the shorter guys, and you came in carrying a little extra weight around the middle into that training, and so on and so forth. In contrast to this one guy who's big, tall, chiseled, world-class athlete who dropped out at one point in the cold surf, just couldn't looked too far ahead and couldn't get his head around it and gave up. But however it happens, the process that you guys go through there is ultimately, if I've heard one guy say, if there is anything in common, it is just guys that won't give up. So you end up with one way or another a common thread, and let's call it elite. And you make a point in here that elite leaders surround themselves with elite people or elite teams. Um, in another aspect of your life, so you've studied at Harvard Business, another process of vetting and culling down to a very elite subset of what would be a peer group. But if we broaden that, and again, I think your book really applies every day in a lot of ways. So we go out in the corporate world, or my son's on a soccer team, and they're in those environments. There's a much bigger range. There's more diversity in talent and personality, and everything, right? All the attributes, and the fact is, a lot of times you're going to deal with some dead weight. Maybe it's on a team at work, or you might deal with I've run into the bosses and the executives who don't have I'll call it the confidence to want to surround themselves with A players. They want B players. So they feel better about themselves and feel like they're the smartest guy in the room. I don't know if you've spent enough time in the private sector or consulting too. Do you have a thought on that, and how to apply that principle of wanting to surround yourselves with other kind of A players, and what to do when maybe it's not even your choice, but you got to make that work as a team?
Yeah, and that was definitely my favorite thing about being in the SEAL teams, was being surrounded by people that were just top notch, high caliber, because it really does make you a better version of yourself. You can't afford to be the smartest person in the room. You can't do it. If the goal is to be better today or tomorrow than you are today, if you're going to try to continually improve 1% every single day, then you just can't afford that. You need to make sure. I'd rather be the dumbest guy in the room. I want as much to learn and grow as possible, because I'm the product. Like if you're hiring a team and you're afraid of someone outshining you, so you're hiring below your talent level, that's a problem. It's going to undermine you. It seems like a good idea at the time, but it's going to undermine you. You should constantly be trying to hire your replacement. Hire the top-notch talent that you possibly can. It's going to make you look great. You know what I mean? You want to surround yourself with people that are better than you, that are going to challenge you in new and interesting ways. And here's another thing too. That's a label, right? Like better. What does that mean? I've never been in a single room where every single person in that room wasn't better than me at something. Every single person you ever meet is better than you at something. The trick is finding out what that something is, and then learning from them and asking them those questions, right? That's the trick, because you have to get to this point that you start to see when their strengths are different than your own, you have to value that, right? You're not different, you're specialized. Think about how effective a SEAL platoon would be if it was full of a bunch of snipers. You're not going to be an effective team. You need your sniper, your corpsman, your breacher. You need all these roles filled. You're not different, man. You're specialized. And think about that with your teams. Think about that with people that you're surrounding yourself with. One person, even in your inner circle, one person might be incredibly empathetic and knows how to feel what people are feeling and communicate with them. And maybe that's an area that you need to grow. Well, ask that person questions about specifically that. See if you can grow into that area, right? If it's athletics, say you're trying to be a receiver, get in the hip pocket of the person who's running the tightest routes on that team, because that's exactly where you need to improve. Stop being threatened by these things and start seeing other people's strengths as opportunities, right? Lift them up. Share with them what you know too. that's probably the central element of what made my community great, is the fact that we value each other for our strengths. And our teams are built around complementing each other.
That's great. That's great. It reminds me of, as I said that, and as you shared that insight, there's a buddy of mine who is captain of a fire crew. His secret sauce is to love every guy in his crew. And it's interesting since you just mentioned the different words for love in Greek, but his point is I have to embrace every single guy and understand them, and understand what motivates them, understand what they bring to the team and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how ultimately we're all part of a team, and we're better for each of those individuals.
I love it. Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, he gets it.
It's a good one. Well, I mentioned the word leadership. There is an awesome story in your book about a leader that you had called Jim. And this made me super strict about making sure I called you on time for this conversation. You tell a story about being a new guy once you joined that team and showing up for a meeting 2 minutes late. And you got an incredible leadership lesson and example out of that.
Yeah. I think the cockiest a person could ever be in their life is right after they graduate BUDS, SEAL training. You're so cocky, and then you show up to your team and you realize that you don't know anything. You haven't done anything. You're surrounded by people who have. Like, you're so young that you don't even know what you don't know yet, right? And I was in that situation, man. I was a couple of minutes late to a morning meeting. We had a night dive that night, and my platoon chief, phenomenal guy, his name is Jim. He tells me, he's like, hey, stick around afterwards, man. Let's talk. We go through the meeting. I hang out with him afterwards. And he's like, hey, listen, obviously it's not that big of a deal, but, you were late, so you made everybody else late. So you got to pay the man, a little bit of a punishment. He goes, I'm not mad. No big deal. But give me a favor. Grab a rucksack, which is a backpack, and fill it full of 50 pounds and run up the Paraloft Tower, which is like a 5-story building, one time for every guy in the platoon. I was like, whoa, that seems like, I thought he was kidding. I thought he was messing with me. But I went downstairs, grabbed a rucksack. It was like 9:30 in the morning. Fill it full of weight. He knew what I was doing. He comes down after me, and he was like, Nick, you can't do that right now, man. It's a punishment. You have to do it after work. Like, you can't do it in place of a workout. And he's like laughing. So I put it down. He's like, let's go hit chest. And he invites me to go work out with him. So we go and work out, never brings it up, never gives me a hard time. Now we have to start prep. I used to fly miniature submarines called SDVs, right? Super technical, dive equipment. So we're getting all that equipment ready for a night dive. We splash after the sun goes down, do a long dive, we recover. It's probably midnight now. It's been such a long day. And I got this thing sitting over my head the entire time. So I finally get all my gear clean. Now it's 1 o'clock. I head over, grab my rucksack, just so angry. I mean, beyond angry. And I walk over to the Paraloft Tower, and that's when I saw Jim sitting by the door. And that really pissed me off, because now I'm thinking, what, do you not trust me? Is this an integrity issue? You're going to sit here with a stopwatch? Like, what is this? As I got closer to him, I saw that he had a rucksack of his own. And he picked it up, threw it on his back, and he was like, all right, man, let's hit it. And I asked him, I was like, what are you doing? He was like, oh, I'm your leader, man. We're in this together. Your mistakes are my mistakes. Like, your failures are my failures. So let's knock this out. And he took off up the stairs. I took off after him. He didn't bring it up again that entire time. We ran every flight of stairs for like 21 guys. It took a very long time. We talked about God, family, the rest of it. He never gave me a hard time. Afterwards, put my rucksack down, got on my motorcycle, went home. And it's really interesting. Like, what was he doing in that moment? What was the point? Was he saying, hey, plus or minus a minute on target, 2 minutes, big deal, military stuff? No, that's not what that was. He was just shaking me up. He was saying, dude, you're mine. I'm going to mentor you. You're mine. He was taking ownership of me. And what's interesting is he won my respect. I allowed him to mentor me. I looked at the way he had his gear set up. He had his body armor set up a certain way. I emulated it exactly, because I figured, hey, he's done 7 platoons. Maybe he's learned a thing or two. He put himself as a leader in my life by sharing in my misery. And that's what mentorship looks like. When I got out of the SEAL teams, I realized I needed to fill that spot again, right? So I've constantly looked for that mentor in my life, and that's the only way to mitigate that learning curve cost. And he demonstrated that beautifully. I actually called and asked him if I could put that in the book. And he was like, yeah, man. I was like, can I give you the credit? I want your name in there. And he was like, yeah, sure. I'm so thankful of that. I've shared that story. And one thing that I'd like to do after sharing that story too is challenge like whoever listened to it. Think about that person in your life who grabbed a hold of you and gave you that 1 degree course correction that you desperately needed. That person that mentored you and stuck it out for you and shared with your pain, shared with your successes. And just give me a favor, like reach out to them, give them a call, like now. Give them a call and tell them how much it meant to you. Tell them the effects and that it worked. Give them the feedback that they need because they need to hear it. They'll do it again, right? So pay them the respect of giving them a call and saying thank you.
Yeah, right on. And then maybe think about how to pay it forward and be that type of mentor to someone else eventually. Is that so? I might have missed it in the book if you called it out specifically. Is this the gentleman that you quote first at the beginning of the book, James Boa?
Yeah.
All right. So just to give him full credit, that's amazing.
There you go. Thanks for that. Yeah, great guy, man. I was so blessed to have had that time in the SEAL teams. I just feel so thankful to have had that experience, and after getting out, it set the bar so high. I wanted to go to Harvard Business School because, again, I wanted to surround myself by people that were going to challenge me. I wanted to work in the NFL, with top-notch athletes for the same reason. I love that that's how my path started because it's given me something to constantly pursue. And, if I can share any amount of wisdom, if I can, add some light in the darkness, man, that's what I live for now. That's why I do what I do for a living. I value what Jim did by giving back. And that's something that I'm constantly trying to do. Like anybody who will listen, man, it's my purpose. It's my why. It's my passion. And I'm so thankful to get to do what I do for a living. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing it. When did the book come out? And let people know, please, where to find you as an author, where to find your book most readily, how to get in touch with you, and to keep up with you, and maybe your comedy gigs.
Yeah. So the book came out in May. It's called Elite. So it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple. There's an audio book too. I actually read it myself, which was an interesting experience. A lot of fun. So that's a lot of fun. On Instagram, I'm Nick Hayes Life, and I'm the same on Twitter. That's pretty much what I go by. My company, my website is eliteteams.com, and I'm available for keynotes and all that jazz. And then for comedy stuff, Comedy Store. I just follow me on Instagram, and I'll let you know when I'm doing shows. So I do them whenever I can.
Perfect. Yeah, I want to get up to a show. And before we close it out completely, you just mentioned your why, and I know in the book you also mentioned that your family is your why, your wife and I believe 3 children. So just tell me a little bit about that and how fatherhood's gone for you. And you talk about sort of the warrior mentality versus the victim and the pity party mentality. Are you finding a chance to apply all this kind of stuff with your kids and in fatherhood, and how is that going? I know for me, you go after each day with the best intentions, and sometimes I don't know if you've got any suggestions like a daily routine or something like that. Some days you do kind of conquer the day, and other days I find that it gets ahead of me, and I can lose it. It's always a challenge. That's an interesting journey as well.
Yeah. I think the word routine is what really matters here. There's people who like to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and do that. I think it's great. If you want to live in California, but operate on East Coast time, it's going to give you some advantage probably in some ways. And the consistency is what's going to matter. For me, I spend my mornings with the family, and then I get hot professionally later on in the day. So I'm consistent with that every single day. And I think that's what matters, because you're more inclined to click on your Instagram and stare at that black mirror than you are to sit down on your butt and play with your kids with their toys, right? That's sad. So you set aside that time every single day so that you can imprint on them. I'll tell you right now, YouTube, Netflix, not good enough. Not going to raise the kids for you. You got to do it yourself, man. And I'll tell you what, like the time that we invest in these youngsters while they're little is going to pay dividends down the road. And I'll tell you, like for me, having the kids just added a extra dimension to my life. It makes me think about the things that I say more. It makes me think about the gravity of what I'm doing for a living. It makes me think about what kind of product am I bringing up? What kind of experience are they having? And what are they going to do? That's why I want to let them chase their own passions. Like if one of them shows, like my son, you know, he can already throw an arm bar. You know, he's always going for like a rear naked choke whenever I'm on a couch. I love that about him. I walk in the door and the first thing he's like, Dad, let's fight. You know, so I'll like spar around with them and roll around. I love it. But if his thing was, hey, Dad, let's paint. Oh, I'd pick up a brush, man. You know, let them follow their passion. Just be involved. Be there. Listen to what they're saying and enjoy every second of it, man, because it is going to go by too fast.
That's super cool. Yeah, just kind of meet them where they are and where their passions are. Well, hey, thanks for sharing that, Nick, and the time and your book. Highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. I'll probably reread it. It's one of those that's going to sit here on the shelf for reference. And it really enjoyed the chat. Look forward to keeping in touch. And I'm going to come check out one of these shows one of these days. Now that you challenged yourself to do it, I want to come see what that 5 to 7 minutes looks like.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, let's definitely stay in touch.
Thanks. Really appreciate it, Nick. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, brother.
Wow. Listening back to that, I was trying out a new microphone and I really don't like how hollow it sounded. So I owe you and Nick an apology for that. But even more importantly, Nick was coming through loud and clear, and he was the one with some great lessons and stories to share. I would really encourage grabbing his book and connecting with him online. Super knowledgeable, insightful, and really great guy. You can hit this episode's webpage for links to everything. You'll find the show notes and the links at manofmastery.com/020. manofmastery.com/020. And again, please look out on Instagram for posts for this episode and help share, like, comment, and tag others who might benefit from these interviews with Nick and others. We've had some great guests so far, and I'm really excited about some others we've got coming up here in the near future. I've got a couple more authors lined up. I have a consultant in the culinary space, an expert on real estate investing, a couple charities that we're going to speak to and make you aware of. And then I have a world champion wrestler that hopefully we'll get on the show here sometime coming up in October. Okay, that's it for this week. Get out there, put this stuff to work. Shoot me a message on Instagram or through the webpage. Let me know how it's going for you. Any insights, comments, suggestions for future guests? Love to hear it all. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you next Thursday.